Hello everybody and welcome to this, my first of only one video, because it's all we're going to need for this super simple, super tiny Reto. I am honestly not sure how it's pronounced. Ultra wide and slim, ultra wide lens, focal distance equals 22 millimeters. That's right, this is a tiny little ultra wide point and shoot camera. The Reto Ultra Wide 22 is a toy grade or fun grade, depends on which either term is just fine. 35 millimeter point and shoot camera. Now what that means is that you're not going to get stellar results from a technical perspective out of this camera. It can hold any 35 millimeter film, though most 35 millimeter films won't work perfectly in it. So we'll talk a little bit about film in choice in the tips section. And all you have to do to take a picture is point it at a thing and press the shutter button, and you will take a photo. It has no light meter. It uses a very simple guillotine shutter, which is one that just opens and then comes back into place just like that, with a shutter speed of approximately 1/125th of a second. Has a fixed aperture of f11, which with a 22 millimeter lens gives you a very good depth of field. No flash sync because this camera has no ability to use a flash. This also, insofar as I know, is possibly, if not certainly, the widest toy grade camera ever made. If there is a wider angle toy grade camera than this, or fun grade camera, I don't know about it. The La Sardina by Lomography is, I believe, also 22 millimeters, but I guess this would tie the La Sardina. Anyway, back when these were Vivitar, and there were other brands of this camera that were released before the Reto, same exact thing, different badge. But back when these were the Vivitar, at least, these were often given away to vacationers who had bought packages for their vacation, just as a way to say, hey, have this free camera if you forgot yours, now you got to go buy some film. Also, this of the super simple cameras that are on the market right now, this is the only one that I know of for certain. That's not true. The Ektar 35, I learned 20 minutes after writing the script, is the same, but there are very few of them that I can say for certain have compound lenses. So what I mean by that, let me zoom way in here. So you might be able to see right there is a lens, right? Obviously. Now if we look inside of the camera, there we go. There you can see the aperture or in the back of the shutter, and there's another lens. So this camera has a 2-element lens in it. I couldn't tell you what types of elements they are. I'm going to guess one of them is meniscus or plano concave on the front, and the other one is probably also meniscus or plano concave on the back. And that would give you a very wide angle with two very simple acrylic elements. The target market for the Reto 22 is the toy, casual, fun photographer. We know that because it is primarily made of plastic. There are a handful of metal components in here. It is very, very small and very light. This thing, I know it's kind of hard to see on a video how small it is, but it's 100 millimeters by 59 millimeters by 28 millimeters. So for those of us in the US, about 4 inches by about 3 inches. I'm sorry, by about 2.25 inches rather, by about a little bit more than an inch this way. Very small. And it only weighs 70 grams, which is around about 2.25 ounces. The production for these are made by Sunpet Industries in Hong Kong, and as the Reto, they went into production under this badge in 2022 at some point, and so far as I can tell, these are at minimum still being sold new. These have been in production under various badges since sometime in the 1990s. Now, as we do, let's go over all of the things that are on this camera so you can see how to use all of your camera's features. So starting here on the top, we have the shutter button and the frame count window. So this will tell you how many frames you've used, and this will, when armed, fire the shutter. On the front of the camera, we have this grip. All right, this is so nitpicky. It's not nitpicky. This is a big deal. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, that's 18. 2 more here, that's 20. Guys, Sunpet, come on. If you'd put 2 more of these squares here, there'd be 22 squares for the 22 millimeter. Guys. Okay, grip, lens, text, viewfinder, little thing to look good and help you hold it, I guess. Model number or name. On the back of the camera, we have some tape. So this camera does not have a window that lets you see what kind of film is in it, so I put frog tape on the back of cameras like this often so that I can just write what kind of film I have in it. It's a good tip. Also keeps your nose gunk from getting onto the back of the camera, which is nice. So here we have the film door release, viewfinder window, film advance gear right here. On the camera's bottom, quite a lot to see. We have the film rewind and the film rewind release button and the remnants of a sticker, I guess. That's kind of a shiny spot. To get into the camera, all we have to do is find the film back release and push it down. This one on this camera is a little bit tricky. I don't know if they are all that way or not, but it doesn't like opening when there's no film in it, which isn't a great thing because then it's hard to put film in it. Now that we've got it open inside of the camera, this is the film cassette chamber. Here's the shutter area or the image area where the photo will be taken. You might be able to see, if I put a little more light in here, there we go, might be able to see that the film plane is curved, and that curved film plane is used to help correct for field curvature in the lens and also to minimize the amount of light loss, which is the vignetting that's characteristic of the images that these types of cameras produce. So the light has less distance to travel at the curved edges. That prevents it from being as dark. And also the actual focus plane of this lens is probably somewhat curved as well. So that's why that's curved. Here we have a sprocket that is used to arm the shutter. And here we have a sprocket that is used to advance the frame count. So 2 sprockets, 2 different functions. Film take-up spool here. On the back, we have these guide ridges, or pressure ridges rather, that keep the film moving on plane over the shutter area. And then we have this little metal spring dude right here, and that's used to help keep the film moving smoothly onto the take-up spool. All right, so while we have this open, we're going to load 35mm film into it. So to load 35mm film, you just push the film knob down that way. We're going to grab our roll of 35mm film and drop it into the cassette chamber. Put the film rewind knob in place. Pull out a bit of a leader. Now we're going to advance this spool until we can see a little slit right there. We're going to stick the leader into the slit and then just hold our finger or thumb right here. That's looking pretty good. That's been taken up. Okay. Now we can close this, finish advancing the film a little bit, and we're going to take 2 photos, which will get us to frame 1. There we go. Frame 1, I mean, I can't see that, so I got to assume you can't see that. But yeah, frame 1 is now visible, so we are ready to go and start taking photos. Really simple process to take a photo, by the way. Just like that. So one thing, if you're not used to film, is that film is one and done, meaning it can record an image, or it can record light, a single time in a controlled manner with a proper shutter speed and exposure, which gives you an image, or in an uncontrolled manner where every photon reaching it is recorded until the film can't take any more of them. Come on. By doing something like this works so much better when I can do it smoothly. Come on. There we go. In an uncontrolled manner by opening the film back. So if you were to open up your film back like this, you would not be able to see your photos that you took. In fact, all of the film outside of the cassette would be ruined because the photons reaching it would be recorded and it would erase everything that was there or that could be there. But what I'm doing is showing you how the film moves in the camera so you can see what's going on and understand it. So we've got the frame count advance up here. We've got the shutter rearming advance down here. So these two sprockets that move as the film advances. So we'll take a photo, advance the film. The sprockets engage with these gears to advance the frame count and then to rearm the shutter, just like that. Right? Pretty easy. And one of the things you can do when you're using the camera, you'll know, by the way, that you've loaded the film correctly if the shutter rearms, because if the film is not moving through the camera, the shutter will not rearm. So that's a must. The other thing you can use to tell that the film is moving is this film advance lever, which, there we go. It does that, right, when the film advances. But the easiest way is just to know that the film's moving is just whether or not the shutter works. Okay, so you've gone through your day. You've taken however many shots are on your film. What you're going to do is you're going to push down the film rewind button, pull out this lever right here, and now you're going to rewind your film. And you're going to hear a clicking as you do it, and that's completely normal. I'm showing you with the back open what it looks like. That's why you don't hear the clicking as much. And then you can open the back. Now I'm leaving a little bit of a leader out because the more that I use this film, the more that it's just absolute pain to get the leader out of the cassette. So now you pull the film rewind post out. Now you can remove your film that you've shot and now put in another roll of film, or if you're done, close up the back and put the camera away for the day. Just make sure, it's always a good practice to trigger the shutter when you're done shooting for the day. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to take a photo with the Reto 22. It's super easy. You can see the viewfinder up here on the top. You look through the back right here, and that's how you frame your image. You just kind of look through it and decide what you want to be in it. And then when you're ready, you push the silver shutter button, and that takes the photo. You advance the film when you're done, and the motion of the film through the camera will then go ahead and advance it and rearm the shutter. So what about double exposures? You can't. Double exposure prevention's built into the way that this camera is made, so you cannot take a double exposure with it because the motion of the film is what rearms the shutter. There's no way to bypass that. So, a few things I can give you for tips to use this camera. The first one is going to be mind your fingers. It's very easy to have your fingers end up being in the frame. If your fingers are in the frame, there's really no getting them out of there. So you have to hold the camera a very specific way, which is to say that normally when I assume you as well, hold a camera, what you're going to do is you're going to put your fingers around it. Hold it instead, not like this where your fingers are gripping it and pointing out and away from the camera, but maybe more with your fingers flatter, or even better, what you're going to try to do is just hold the top and bottom and then not have any fingers on the front of the camera at all. And then that will help you keep your fingers out of the images. So something like that will work, like this, where you have your fingers just on the side of it. The next tip that I've got for you is that this lens flares like crazy when the sun is in the photo. And it's not even like, it flares and it ghosts, both. It's not even an attractive flare or ghost. It makes this ring pattern very distracting. The flare will wash out the scene, and the ring pattern will absolutely dominate your scene, whether or not you have black and white or color film. So it's just a big ring that can be on the entire frame. So to the best of your ability, keep the sun out of the camera, out of the front of the camera. Shoot with the sun to your back. The trade-off to that is that, yeah, you're gonna get your shadow into the images. The next tip I have is to use 400 ISO film or faster. These are uncoated acrylic lenses in this camera, and there are two. So those two lenses sap a lot of the light from the scene, and even with 400 ISO film in full sun, this camera can underexpose your images and lead to very, very dark shadows. And when I do a review on this camera in the not distant future, a lot of the images in that review will show that. My next tip is that if you use a slower film like 100 ISO, you can create images that in full sun feel kind of like film noir images, and that's because you're going to lose most all of your shadow detail, and your highlights are going to be medium to slightly underexposed. Now, also, in the vein of what film to use, color film shows off a lot of saturation and highlights in the lens vignetting area. So if you embrace that look, it can really work well. You're going to get very rich and saturated color out of this film. The next tip and last tip is to keep the camera generally level. And everything, when you do that, you're going to control your verticals and your horizontals. Everything in front of your camera from 1 meter to infinity is going to be in focus. The sharpest focus on this camera seems to be around 6 to 8 feet out in front of it in the very center of the frame. So if you keep, so put what you want to have be in sharpest focus in the center, if possible, about 6 to 8 feet out in front of you, and then keep your camera level and you'll have the best results. If you're taking landscapes, infinity focus is suitably sharp, and then you really do need to make sure that your camera is as level as possible, because any sort of tilt with a 22 millimeter lens is going to lead to you having very askew horizons and vertical lines. So a few things not to do with your camera. Don't store it with the shutter ready to fire. Always discharge the shutter to release the tension that it's built up in the springs. That tension is put in when you advance the film, and that will prevent your shutter timing damage. Now, I know these aren't expensive cameras, but you still don't necessarily want your shutter failing or being slower than it should be. The next thing is, don't leave this in your car, because heat and cold can both damage it. It's not likely to be a theft target like other cameras, but heat can cause the plastic to warp. Cold can cause it to shrink and crack. So you don't want to store your camera in your car, because that will probably ruin it pretty quickly, not to mention what all of that does to your film. Also, don't store it in a plastic bag, because that's going to mess with the handful of metal components in here, and it's also going to cause the risk of getting some fungus in your camera. And don't let it get wet. The couple of metal components like the spring in here they will rust. They could definitely rust. You don't want that to happen. And so even though this is a fun camera and it's fun to use, it's a precision tool and it should still be handled with care and respect. And as long as you take care of your Reto Ultra Wide, Fast and Slim, or Ultra Wide and Slim, you know what it's called by now, 22, your camera will take care of you. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in whatever video comes next.